The morning sun cast long shadows across Windsor Castle's ancient stones as April Fool's Day dawned with unusual promise. Tour buses had begun arriving earlier than normal, disgorging waves of camera-wielding visitors eager to capture the pageantry of the changing of the guard. Among them strode Jamie Wilson, his Australian accent cutting through the respectful murmurs of the crowd as he adjusted his expensive sunglasses. "This is going to be epic, mates," Jamie announced, his confident grin never wavering as he surveyed the growing throng of tourists. At 26, he'd built a modest online following back in Sydney with what he called consequence-free comedy pranks that pushed boundaries, while carefully dancing around actual repercussions. April Fool's Day at Windsor Castle couldn't ask for a better stage. His friends Mark and Liam exchanged uneasy glances as they trailed behind, cameras already rolling despite their evident reluctance. "Maybe we should just do the standard tourist thing," Mark suggested, his voice lowered. "These guards aren't exactly known for their sense of humor," Jamie scoffed, running a hand through his carefully tousled hair. "They're paid to stand there and look pretty. Besides, everyone does the usual try to make the guard laugh routine. I'm going bigger." The gleam in his eyes spoke of boundaries waiting to be crossed, of viral potential that overrode common sense. 20 yards away, Corporal Thomas Barnes stood at his post, scarlet uniform gleaming in the spring sunshine, bearskin cap adding imposing height to his already substantial frame. 8 years in the King's Guard had taught him to read crowds instinctively. Most visitors showed proper respect. Some tested boundaries with harmless antics. A rare few, like the loud Australian now positioning himself for maximum audience impact, came looking for trouble. Barnes remained motionless, his eyes fixed forward with practiced discipline. Behind that stoic gaze lay years of rigorous training and service that the approaching prankster couldn't begin to comprehend. As Jamie and his reluctant cameraman drew closer, Barnes did what he'd done countless times before. He prepared to represent the crown with unwavering dignity, regardless of whatever foolishness April 1st might bring. "Look at him," Jamie stage whispered to his friends, loud enough for nearby tourists to hear. "Standing there like a department store mannequin. Do you think they select them based on who can look the most constipated?" Several American teenagers snickered while a British couple shot disapproving glances. Jamie squared his shoulders and approached, his practiced swagger honed through years of pushing social boundaries. Back home, he'd built his reputation on increasingly audacious stunts, from interrupting university lectures dressed as superheroes to staging fake proposals in upscale restaurants. Each prank required escalation. Each new video demanded more shock value than the last. "This whole get-up is just fancy dress-up," Jamie continued, circling the guard with exaggerated scrutiny. "Red coat, fluffy hat, shiny buttons. It's theater, not actual military." His dismissal betrayed profound ignorance about the elite soldiers who rotated between ceremonial duties and active deployment. "Jamie." "Seriously," Liam murmured, camera aimed reluctantly at the unfolding scene. "These guys are actual soldiers. I read that they're tourist attractions." Jamie cut him off with the confidence of someone who'd never faced consequences for his actions. If they were real soldiers, they'd be off doing real soldier things, not playing statue for holiday photos. A middle-aged woman gently pulled her curious children back a few steps, recognizing the signs of impending disrespect. The crowd had begun to shift, some drawing closer in anticipation of entertainment, others creating distance to dissociate from whatever was coming. What Jamie failed to notice in his performance was the guard's eyes focused, alert, and bearing the unmistakable awareness of someone who'd faced situations far more intense than a tourist's misguided prank. While Barnes maintained perfect stillness, his peripheral vision tracked Jamie's movements with the instinctive assessment of a trained soldier. "Today's plan is genius," Jamie informed his increasingly uncomfortable friends, reaching for his backpack with theatrical flourish. Start small, build up, then deliver the ultimate April Fool's payoff. It'll be legendary. He pulled out his phone, checking the time. We've got about 20 minutes before I unveil the main event. Mark shifted his weight, camera dipping slightly. Maybe we should just get some normal photos and move on. There's that pub you wanted to try for lunch. And miss my shot at Royal Guard prank immortality. Not happening. Jamie's eyes gleamed with the particular determination of someone who measured his worth in views and reactions. Trust me, this is going to be the one that finally puts us on the map. Jamie began his performance with exaggerated military marching, legs kicking high, arms swinging with comical precision, a caricature of discipline intended to mock its genuine article. Attention! He barked in a terrible British accent. Royal Guard inspection. A ripple of uncomfortable laughter spread through the gathering onlookers. A family from Japan paused their photo-taking, the father gently guiding his children a few steps back from the unfolding scene. A German couple exchanged whispers, their expressions making clear their disapproval even across language barriers. Meanwhile, a school group of teenagers in matching blue blazers watched with mixed reactions, some giggling, others visibly embarrassed. Sir, a castle staff member approached, her tone professional but firm. I need to remind you that the King's Guards are serving military personnel. We ask that visitors show appropriate respect. Jamie flashed his most charming smile. Just having a bit of April Fool's fun. No harm done. He waited until she moved along before muttering, "Killjoy," just loud enough for those nearby to hear. Encouraged by having faced no real consequences, Jamie escalated. He moved closer to Barnes, posed for selfies with exaggerated faces, then pretended to polish the guard's buttons while providing running commentary. "Missed a spot there, mate. Can't have the Queen's sorry King's toy soldiers looking shabby. Kid, this is getting out of hand," Mark whispered but continued filming, caught between friendship, loyalty, and growing discomfort. Near the school group, their history teacher spoke quietly but clearly to her students. "Despite what that young man is suggesting, the King's Guard are elite soldiers with combat training and experience. Most have served in conflict zones before receiving the honor of ceremonial duty." Jamie caught fragments of her explanation and rolled his eyes dramatically. "Hear that? Apparently I'm messing with an elite soldier." His air quotes and mocking tone drew a few nervous laughs, but increasingly fewer as the crowd's mood shifted. Throughout it all, Corporal Barnes remained perfectly motionless, his discipline forged through years of training that had prepared him for far worse than tourist antics. His gaze remained fixed forward, his posture immaculate, his breathing measured and controlled. Only the slightest tension in his jaw betrayed that he was indeed human. Jamie, interpreting this composure as weakness rather than strength, grew bolder. See nothing. They might as well replace him with a waxwork. Probably be cheaper, too. He leaned closer, examining the guard's face with theatrical interest. "Hello? Anyone home? Or did they just wind you up this morning and leave you here?" A few feet away, a castle security guard spoke quietly into his radio, eyes never leaving Jamie. The staff's tolerance was visibly thinning. Yet Jamie remained oblivious, riding the momentary attention like a wave, already planning his next escalation. "Time to take things up a notch," he announced to his increasingly reluctant audience. "This is just the warm-up act." The morning wore on, and Jamie's antics grew progressively more intrusive. He began narrating an imaginary nature documentary about the elusive Royal Guard in its natural habitat, complete with exaggerated Australian accent. When that failed to provoke a reaction, he started a one-sided interview, holding an invisible microphone to the guard's face and answering his own ridiculous questions. "Does it hurt to wear a dead bear on your head all day? No comment. I'll take that as a yes, Jamie declared to diminishing laughter. Behind Barnes's impassive expression. His mind briefly flashed to his training at Catterick, 18 grueling weeks where he'd learned to maintain composure under far greater pressure than tourist pranks. He recalled his drill sergeant's thundering voice. Your discipline reflects centuries of tradition. Your bearing represents the crown itself. The memory strengthened his resolve as Jamie's behavior worsened. Jamie, seriously, let's move on, Liam pleaded. Camera still rolling, but enthusiasm long gone. You've done enough for one video. Not even close, Jamie replied, lowering his voice conspiratorially. I haven't shown you the main event yet. He patted his backpack with a wink. It's April Fool's. Go big or go home. Mark stepped closer, genuine concern crossing his face. What exactly are you planning? Just watch, Jamie grinned. It'll be the ultimate guard reaction video. Trust me, people will be talking about this for years. Nearby tourists had begun giving them a wide berth. Parents steering children to different vantage points, couples finding reasons to move along the courtyard. The atmosphere had shifted from tourist excitement to something more uncomfortable, the tension of witnessing someone crossing boundaries of basic decency. Jamie noticed the thinning crowd around him and doubled down, his voice growing louder, his gestures more expansive. His comments became increasingly personal, mocking everything from the guard's posture to speculating rudely about what might be underneath the fancy costume. Do they make you audition for this gig? He asked nobody in particular. Stand perfectly still while some idiot tourist tries to make you laugh. Bet that's not what you signed up for when you joined the costume department. Each disrespectful comment revealed Jamie's profound ignorance about the elite soldiers who rotated between ceremonial duties and active deployment. For men like Barnes, standing guard was not merely ceremonial, it was an honor earned through years of service, often including combat rotations that tourists like Jamie couldn't comprehend. A security guard moved closer, speaking quietly into his radio while maintaining a clear view of the escalating situation. The history teacher had relocated her students to a different area entirely, occasionally glancing back with disapproval. All right, mates, Jamie announced, reaching for his backpack with theatrical flourish. Time for the main event, the April Fool's prank to end all pranks. His friends exchanged alarmed glances as he unzipped the bag. I've been saving this all morning, Guy. The remaining onlookers sensed the crossing of an invisible line. Several more stepped back while others watched with the morbid fascination of witnesses to an impending car crash. Jamie, however, appeared oblivious to the shifting atmosphere, focused entirely on his moment of perceived glory. Sometimes, he declared, you need to make a splash to get noticed. With a magician's flourish, Jamie pulled from his backpack what appeared to be an expensive professional camera. Only his friends recognized it for what it truly was, a high-quality water gun meticulously disguised to resemble photography equipment. The modifications had cost Jamie nearly £200 from a specialty prop shop in London, an investment he deemed worthwhile for what he called prank immortality. Gunt. Now, everyone, Jamie announced, slipping back into his role as entertainer. I'm going to capture a very special moment with His Majesty's finest. He raised the fake camera, adjusting non-existent settings with practiced movements. Several tourists raised their actual cameras, sensing a moment worth documenting, though, for entirely different reasons than Jamie imagined. The history teacher, noticing the gleam of plastic where a lens should be, suddenly understood what was about to happen. Stop, she called out, breaking into a quick walk toward Jamie. That's completely inappropriate. But Jamie had committed fully to his performance, and now, for the ultimate royal portrait on this fine April Fool's Day. He began a theatrical countdown, playing to his dwindling but attentive audience. 3, 2, 1. The disguised water gun discharged with shocking force, sending a concentrated stream of water directly into Corporal Barnes's face. The liquid splashed across his immaculate uniform, darkening the scarlet fabric and dripping from his bearskin cap in steady rivulets. For a heartbeat that seemed to stretch into eternity, no one moved. Not Jamie, not the crowd, not even the security personnel who had started forward too late. The collective gasp that followed seemed to pull all oxygen from the courtyard. Cameras lowered in shock. Parents physically turned children away from the scene. Jamie's own friends stepped backward instinctively, distancing themselves from what they now recognized as a serious transgression. Barnes remained perfectly still, water streaming down his face. His training so ingrained that even this direct assault didn't immediately break his stance. Droplets gathered on his chin, fell to his chest, darkened the medals that represented actual service to crown and country. His eyes, however, had changed, fixed now directly on Jamie with the focused intensity of a soldier who had made a decision. Jamie's triumphant smile began to falter at the edges. The lack of immediate reaction wasn't what he'd expected. The crowd's horror rather than amusement wasn't in his mental script. Something in the guard's unwavering gaze sent the first chill of realization down his spine. "It's just water, mate," Jamie offered weakly, the fake camera still clutched in his increasingly unsteady hands. April Fool's, right? All in good. The movement, when it finally came, was so swift and precise that onlookers would later disagree about exactly what they'd seen. Barnes stepped forward with military efficiency, each motion economical and purposeful. His white-gloved hand closed around Jamie's wrist with controlled pressure, not injuring, but completely immobilizing. With his other hand, he relieved Jamie of the fake camera in one smooth motion that spoke of tactical training rather than ceremonial practice. Jamie's bravado evaporated instantly, his face draining of color as he found himself firmly secured by a man whose training and capability he had so thoroughly underestimated. The guard's grip wasn't painful, but it communicated with perfect clarity that any resistance would be unwise. "It was just a joke," Jamie stammered, his Australian accent suddenly thicker with nervousness. The courtyard had fallen into complete silence, the tension almost suffocating as the consequences of his prank began to materialize in real time. Barnes's expression remained professional, but there was something in his eyes that made Jamie swallow hard, the unmistakable look of someone who had faced actual threats and knew precisely how to handle them. Water continued to drip from the guard's uniform as he held Jamie in place, waiting for the security personnel who were now rushing toward them. In that moment, staring into the composed but unyielding face of the man he'd assaulted for entertainment, Jamie Wilson finally began to understand the difference between a prank and a profound mistake. "The weapon, sir," Barnes stated firmly, his voice carrying the clear authority of command, despite its measured tone. He held the confiscated water gun with the same precise grip he would use for actual contraband. Jamie's wrist remained secured in Barnes's other hand, the guard's posture revealing years of tactical training that had nothing to do with ceremonial duty. "It's just a toy," Jamie protested weakly, his trademark confidence evaporating under Barnes's unwavering gaze. "Just a bit of April Fool's fun. No harm." "Assaulting a King's Guard is a criminal offense," Barnes interrupted, each word precise and controlled despite the water still dripping from his face. "Not a prank, not a joke, not entertainment." Two castle security officers arrived, positioning themselves on either side of Jamie. The crowd had formed a perfect circle around the scene, smartphones capturing every moment of Jamie's humiliation. His friends stood frozen, cameras lowered, their expressions a mixture of embarrassment and relief that they weren't standing in Jamie's place. "Just a prank, mate." Jamie attempted again, a nervous laugh dying in his throat as it met Barnes's steady gaze. "This uniform isn't a costume. Barnes replied, his composure remarkable given the circumstances. "These medals aren't props." He released Jamie's wrist as security took position, but his presence remained commanding. "Before standing on this post today, I completed 2 tours in Iraq. The men who stand at Buckingham Palace tomorrow returned recently from NATO exercises in Eastern Europe." Jamie blinked, his perception visibly shifting as Barnes continued. "Each button on this tunic, each crease, each piece of brass represents over 300 years of unbroken service to the crown. When you mock this uniform, you mock the sacrifices of every soldier who has worn it, including those who never returned home." The crowd remained silent, the only sound being the soft drip of water from Barnes's uniform onto the ancient stones beneath. Several older British visitors nodded in solemn agreement with the guard's words. I didn't know," Jamie admitted. His bravado completely collapsed. "Honestly, I thought you were just, like, ceremonial, not real soldiers." "Every guard on ceremonial duty has earned their place through actual military service," Barnes explained. "The privilege of standing here comes after proving oneself in training and often in combat." One of the security officers spoke into his radio, confirming that police had been notified. Jamie's face paled further at this development. "Those real medals?" Jamie asked, his tone completely transformed, genuine curiosity replacing his earlier mockery. Barnes gave a single nod. "Kosovo peacekeeping mission, 2018. Iraq, 2020. "I'm sorry," Jamie said suddenly, the words seeming to surprise even him with their sincerity. "I truly didn't understand who you are. I was being an idiot." The security officer began to guide Jamie away, explaining in low voices the potential charges for interfering with a king's guard, as they moved him toward the security office. Jamie looked back over his shoulder. "For what it's worth," he called, "I really am sorry. I was wrong about everything." Barnes acknowledged this with the slightest inclination of his head before returning to his position with practiced precision. In one smooth motion, he resumed his stance, shoulders back, chin up, rifle positioned perfectly. Only the darkened patches on his scarlet tunic gave any indication of the incident that had just occurred. The watching crowd remained silent for a moment longer, then slowly, respectfully began to disperse. As they moved away, their manner had changed. Fewer posed for silly photos. More stood at a respectful distance, observing with newfound appreciation. Parents could be heard explaining to their children the true meaning of the guard's presence. Mark and Liam approached the security officers quietly, identifying themselves as Jamie's friends and asking what would happen next. Their cameras were now completely lowered, their earlier role as documentarians of Jamie's prank abandoned in favor of genuine concern. Through it all, Barnes maintained his post, the water slowly drying on his uniform in the spring sunshine. His eyes had returned to their forward gaze, his posture immaculate, his dignity completely intact despite the assault he'd endured. In the face of disrespect, he had responded not with anger but with education, a response that had transformed at least one tourist's perception completely. As the courtyard returned to its normal rhythm, the only evidence of the incident was the slightly darker patches on a scarlet uniform and the profound lesson etched into the memories of everyone who had witnessed it.